With Excel 2010, there are two ways to create a pivot table, and it's worth knowing what the differences are. The first way is the standard way, which you can use with earlier versions of Excel, clicking inside a range and then clicking Insert Pivot Table. You can then arrange the fields the way you want them. Like that. I've slimmed the pivot table down to 2 time periods. The data is based upon a account balance table from the Microsoft AdventureWorks database. The second way to create a pivot table is to use PowerPivot, which is an add-in to Excel, and you can download it free from Microsoft. Click in your Excel range, click on the PowerPivot tab and click Create Linked Table and select My Table Has Headers. This creates a database within PowerPivot, and that database is within your workbook. Then you can click on the Pivot Table button, click OK, and you're back to square one. The field list that you get with PowerPivot is slightly different from the one with regular pivot tables. It's got a different title. There's a search box, so you can search through long lists of measures and dimensions. It has slices added to it. I'm not going to explain those here, but you can add slices to a regular pivot table in Excel 2010. It doesn't have a Defer Layout Update option, which you can see on the regular pivot table field list. Otherwise, it works in a very similar way. This operates the same as any other pivot table. You can use our report filter, and if I go to the other pivot table, you should be able to see that the numbers come out the same. So why would we choose one method over the other? With a pivot table built using PowerPivot like this one, when you click on Pivot Table Tools, there is a drop down called OLAP Tools. That has an option called Convert to Formulas. If you click on that and click Convert, it takes your pivot table and converts it to Excel formulas. What that means is you can now move these wherever you want to. You can insert a column, you can take some part of your report and move it somewhere else, and still the report is live linked to the database. If you click on one of the cells, you'll see that it has a cube value function in it, and on the Formulas tab, click Trace Precedence. You can see that cube value function is driven by values in the worksheet: the date, the division, the measure, and the account. And because the cube value functions are regular Excel functions, then you can move them wherever you want to. Contrast this with the regular, or the pivot table produced by regular means, and you can see that on the Pivot Table Tools tab, the OLAP Tools drop down is grayed out. It's not available. And as I'm sure you already know, Excel gets very upset if you try to insert a row or column into a pivot table, which means that pivot tables are less than ideal for reports that require careful placement. You can use getPivotData functions, but they require you to have a visible pivot table to link to, and they're far more difficult to work with than Excel cube functions. So to recap then, building your pivot table with PowerPivot gives you the option to take advantage of Excel's cube functions, which are very useful if you need to lay out a report with very careful placement, such as a financial or management report, like a balance sheet or a profit and loss account. And as we've seen, the cube functions are still live linked to the database. If you're familiar with creating pivot tables, then I don't think you'll have any difficulties creating them using PowerPivot. Also, if you're prepared to invest some time in learning more about PowerPivot, you'll see that it has some pretty amazing capabilities, one of which, for example, is the integration of data from a wide variety of databases.